If a bill is successful, it would remove Confederate monuments from Virginia's Capitol Square. And also, affordability or tax hikes. Spanberger's agenda has been caught in a political crossfire. It stayed the water. I'm your host, Eric Claville, and you're joining us for our 2026 General Assembly series as we take a look at Confederate monuments on Capitol Square and the tax proposals and affordability agenda for Governor Spanberger. Once again, I want to thank you for joining us, as you always do, as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. Well, listen, we hope that you all are enjoying this Super Bowl Sunday, and we want to thank you for joining us. Before you put the ribs on the grill and the chicken and all of that and pop out the chips and dip and have all your friends and family over and enjoying this Super Bowl on this beautiful Sunday. Now, I'm not asking you who you got in the game, but we know it's going to be a great game. We got a couple familiar faces in the game itself, but we're just hoping it's a great game and, again, a great pastime, for us here in the country. So, once again, good luck to your team, and may the best team win. We're covering the General Assembly during this time of the year. There are a lot of things that are happening, and those that listen to this show know that they're happening, and they know that we cover this. I cover this every year around this time. And not only that, but, we have bills and resolutions, and, of course, it's always a good time for, each party, each side to catch a soundbite and to kind of run with it. And that's exactly what we have here when we take a look at the affordability or tax hike argument. From the White House all the way down to the barbershop. I went to my barbershop to get a cut, and they were saying, hey, what's up with those taxes and what's going on? So, again, it's great that people are engaging and paying attention to what's happening because, as I always say, it's not just your community, not just your city, not just your Commonwealth, but it's also your country. And as I say, as Virginia goes, so goes the rest of the country. So, look, let's get right into it. This past week, we've had a couple of bills come across and some that really caught our eye. This past week, we had the first meeting of the newly formed HBCU caucus. Hats off to Delegate Alex Askew, who represents the great part of the great city of Virginia Beach. And then also my senator, my former dean. I had a fortunate opportunity to work with her in the Senate and in administration, none other than Senator Mamie Locke, who actually co-chaired this particular caucus, which addresses HBCUs and their needs and advances as well. So really the first in the country. Now, of course, this kind of mirrors what's happening on the congressional side on the federal level, but it was a phenomenal launch a couple of weeks ago and had the first meeting just last week. And not only that, but also there was a launch of our internship initiative here in the Commonwealth, something that we've already been doing through Pathways, and something that, of course, several other groups have taken a charge and are also doing. And we had the governor and the lieutenant governor take the microphone and address this issue and endorse it, that we believe that no student should leave college without at least one paid internship. And that's the charge of our president here, Dr. J, who I have the opportunity to serve under and to serve with here at this great institution, that all of our students, can come here at this institution and receive a paid internship. So we're grateful to have all of our public institutions, our state legislature, everyone support this initiative, not just for us, but all institutions, because the value of our education, especially higher education, and more specifically, our higher education here in the Commonwealth is definitely second to none. So being able to have a paid internship leaving is definitely a game changer. So with that, I want to cover one piece of legislation that I think is very important, especially now during Black History Month. We believe that this is just a continuation of really what took place during what we call the Black Lives Matter movement. And Senator Adam Eban, Democrat out of Alexandria, who is in his last term because he is stepping down to become part of the Spanberger administration. He is going to become the senior advisor to the Cannabis Control Authority. And he authored this legislation in order to remove some of the final Confederate monuments here in the Commonwealth of Virginia that are on Capitol Square. You know, these statues depict General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, Governor William Extra Billy Smith, and Dr. Hunter Holmes McGuire. Now, these monuments to these three men were erected on the Capitol Square here in Virginia in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Now, according to the Virginia Mercury, this is when laws disenfranchised African Americans and when memorials to Confederates were surfacing in public places like courthouses and other municipal buildings. And of course, we know about Monument Row in Richmond. That, again, one of our great alums here, twin, Devon Henry, former rector, Big Rec of our Board of Visitors, was instrumental in removing those, and really one of the only construction companies that had the ability or the bravery to even remove them. He had to wear a bulletproof vest every time he went outside in order to remove those monuments because he didn't know if a bullet was coming. So again, that shows the Spartan value, but also shows the importance and the courage that it takes, even in this day and time, to stand up against discrimination. Well, these particular Confederate monuments depict individuals that were prominent generals, such as Jackson and Smith. Now, of course, Smith went on to become governor of Virginia in the mid-1800s, and Dr. McGuire was a Confederate doctor during the Civil War. Now, these gentlemen supported slavery and later opposed voting rights for black people. And also a local veteran affairs hospital in Richmond was previously named after him, but it says has been renamed. Now, when we take a look at why this bill is important, Senator Evans said these are not people we need to lionize. This bill directs the Department of General Services to remove and store the statues until the General Assembly can determine their final destination. Now, when we take a look at this particular bill and the reason for it, you know, many Confederate monuments, keep in mind, were removed since 2020. Now, why is this? 2020, a state law granted local governments the ability to relocate them, right? Some monuments in Charlottesville and Richmond garnered the most attention with a lot of fierce debate and demonstrations, right? Both supporting and opposing. You know, some of these groups believe, such as, you know, United Daughters of the Confederacy, which are headquartered in Richmond, said that the statues represent a heritage of Southern pride and resistance to federal overreach. Now, of course, we know there's, you know, that's a very flowery way of interpreting that time of history. Now, the state conference on the NAACP kind of put it in the light of actual truth of history. They said that these objects represent a legacy of racism, violence, intolerance, while glorify people who fought to preserve enslavement of black people. And that's what the Civil War was about. Fighting to preserve slavery on a state level, states' rights, federal overreach. And these individuals that fought against the Union or fought against the federal law to abolish slavery are seen in various states by some people as heroes, fighting for states' rights. But again, how you interpret history and how you look at it all depends on your disposition. But truth is truth. And that's what existed during that time period. You know, I got to give a shout out to, of course, how this movement started. Back in 2016, a high school student by the name of Ziana Bryant, she petitioned the Charlottesville City Council to take them down. Now, my good friend, chair of the political science department at Virginia State University, also fraternity brother, Dr. Wes Bellamy, who was a city council at that time, and Kristen Zandkos. They spearheaded a local ordinance to remove it from there and also from a local park. Now, of course, this got challenged, and we all know in the summer of 2017, the Ku Klux Klan and far-right militia groups, Confederate groups, they all rallied in the city, culminating in the deadly Unite the Right rally. We remember that where, unfortunately, a young lady lost her life. Again, we remember the tiki torches, angry white males that were marching on the campus of University of Virginia in this particular time. So it was a very, very, very tough time where we saw, you know, individuals that supported racism, supported legacies of racism, rose up. And we also saw during that time period in 2020, which sparked a nationwide debate when George Floyd, a black man, was murdered in Minneapolis at the hands of police that kneeled on his neck for over 9 minutes. We also see what's happening in Minneapolis right now, where we see ICE has taken the life of 2 Americans that were accused of interfering with the federal acts of ICE that have been, of course, the policy of the White House. They have pushed them to become more aggressive. And now, because of this, the president says a softer touch is needed. We also saw in 2021 in Charlottesville and Richmond where they were removed. So with this, we're finding we're looking at a different group, a different time, where we know that we're fighting, and we also see the statue of Barbara Johns being dedicated in the halls of Congress. And of course, the Attorney General's building is named after her. And I bring her up because she was a teenager when she organized the walkout, the protest, for fair schools. And we see this high school student ask and lobby the Charlottesville City Council, to remove these statues. So I want all the young people that are listening to know that you're not too young in order to start a movement, because it only takes one to believe. It only takes one match to start a fire. It doesn't take a whole box, just one, and watch it go. So we want you to make sure that you are fighting for the truth and fighting to make a change. And, I like to quote Senator Eben as we end this topic and we take a look at the next. He said, the statues in Capitol Square, he added, removing them to his do list after giving tours to constituents and feeling jarred by escorting people past them to statues that honor civil rights leaders and women. So as he prepares to leave the legislature, he told the Virginia Mercury to join the Spanberger administration. He likened the attempt to remove them to the way people clean up a campsite before moving on. Senator Evans said, I like to leave Capitol Square better than I found it. Well, Senator Evans, hats off to you, and good luck on this legislation so that we can, once again, see our Commonwealth the way it should be. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Claville, and you're joining us for our 2026 General Assembly series. Today, we're discussing Confederate statues and affordability or tax hikes, the Spanberger agenda caught in political crossfire. We just discussed the history and what's happening now for Confederate monuments and the last ones to be removed from public places, more specifically, the Capitol Square. Now I want to take a look at affordability or tax hikes. Now, of course, we know that nobody likes taxes. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but we realize that that's the way we get public funding to pay for public services. And we also know that Governor-elect Spanberger ran on not through her Unite for Virginia's Future, but she ran on an affordability agenda. Now, we know that prices have skyrocketed since the Trump administration took office. And of course, due to the cut of funding across the board for many states and groups and organizations, primarily when you look at the Affordability Health Care Act, CARE Act, which is also known by Obamacare, which is the extension of Medicaid that a lot of states took to offer Medicare insurance, medical insurance to a lot of people, and also the ability for hospitals to operate and on more individuals to offer services and doctors. That money was taken away by the big, beautiful bill. Now, with this, there are some tax increases that are tax proposals that have been provided and put up by Democrats. Now, with this, because of this, Republicans have seized on these tax proposals, a lot of dormant Democratic tax bills to attack the new governor, even as lawmakers, according to Virginia Mercury, advance measures aimed at lowering costs. I want to take a look first at some of the bills that we see that are aimed at lowering costs and really what has been done. Now, while according to the Virginia Mercury, it says, while Spanberger has avoided weighing in on individual tax bills, her administration on Wednesday highlighted progress on the agenda that she rolled out in December with Democratic leaders, 8 bills are tied to the governor's Affordable Virginia agenda. They've already passed at least one chamber. Now, what are these measures? They include legislation aimed at heating and energy costs for low-income Virginians. Also, establishing statewide weatherization task force to improve home energy efficiency. Now, that's very important because if you ever walk in your house and you walk past a window and you feel air coming in, not is only cold air coming in, but that means heat isn't staying in and it's going out, which makes your heat run longer, work harder. But guess what? That is free. It increases your bill. So weatherization is very important for all of our homes here in Virginia. Now, not only that, but it also empowers local governments to preserve affordable housing, strengthen tenant protections, which some people are against. I could understand if you're a landlord and having to go through extra step to get individuals to pay that can't afford to pay at that time or not paying. It could be a headache. So there's a give and take on that particular one, but really all of them. And also eliminating additional fees on health insurance premiums. Now that helps everyone because when you take a look at health insurance premiums, because of the big beautiful bill, they are skyrocketing. In some localities, the cost of healthcare premiums are going to double. But we know across the board because of the monies taken out by the federal government in order to pay for tax cuts to mostly the wealthy, they were championed by the White House and the Republican-controlled Congress. This is where we are. So lawmakers have also advanced a proposal to better utilize the existing electric grid, again, to lower costs for taxpayers or ratepayers. So one thing that the governor has stated, she said her administration is focused on working with our partners in the General Assembly to lower health care, housing, energy costs for Virginians in every community across the Commonwealth. She also added that she looked forward to signing these bills and every piece of legislation in her agenda into law to bring down costs for Virginians. Now, with that being the case, where is all of this attack coming by Republicans for tax proposals? So that's the governor's agenda, right? Now, Governor Spanberger, when she made affordability a centerpiece for 2026, less than a month into the General Assembly session, there are several dozen tax increase bills that have been filed by Democratic lawmakers, which, again, gave Republicans a ready-made political weapon and an opening to portray the new governor as doing the opposite of what she said she would do. So what are Republicans saying? So when you take a look at it, Republicans have seized on the proposals to mount an aggressive social media campaign where they cast Spanberger, legislative Democrats, as eager to raise taxes and make life more expensive, despite the fact the governor has neither endorsed nor measured any of the measures nor pledged to sign them, and most have not even taken up by committees. Now, I'll explain that process in just a second because that's very important where we see legislation not taken up in committees. But early last week actually, Delegate Joe McNamara, Republican out of Roanoke County, who's a longtime ally of former Governor Glenn Youngkin and a leading GOP voice on tax cuts, he accused the Democrats of breaking their affordability promise and embracing proposals he said would raise costs. So he said there were some really good bills, Democratic bills, Republican bills that really made Virginia more affordable. He said, we're living under this guise that Virginia is in these desperate financial straits. And we are, because you'll see the increased costs. Listen, when you remove $1.3 trillion from social programs, you're in financial dire straits, all right? That's $1.3 trillion. That equals billions of dollars of less dollars coming to states from the federal government. So let's not mistake this. Every state's going to be impacted by billions of dollars that they're going to have to come up with, cut services, cut programs, or increase taxes locally, statewide to pay for it. But he said Virginia is not in desperate financial straits. Now, he did point out what he said was nearly $9 billion in budget surplus over the past 4 years, alongside a similar amount of tax cuts. Youngkin left $2.7 billion for Virginians when he left office, which allowed for more tax cuts. But McNamara argued Democrats are moving into the other direction, pointing to bills that were creating new income tax brackets. Now, he said if we look at where we are from the Democratic philosophies and bills are coming forward, the new tax rates are 6, 8, 10% tax brackets and investment income tax brackets on the top. Now, he warned that higher top rates could push wealthy residents out of Virginia, which, where would they go? Virginia is a great place to do business and to live, and it's fairly low when we look at income tax brackets. But he said this is the kind of what the Democrat version of affordability is. The Republican version of affordability is very, very different. Yes, it is. It is providing more tax breaks to the wealthy because trickle-down economics does not work. But they also amplified these arguments online on Twitter or X, waiting for any Democrat to explain how forcing moms and dads to pay 10% more to take their kids to Kings Dominion will help with affordability. He also underscored GOP's proposals to phase out the car tax, protect standard deduction, and eliminate the remaining 1% grocery tax. He said Democrats routinely block. So, again, tax revenue pays for public services. If you eliminate the car tax, if you eliminate additional tax on grocery, then 1% tax, by the way, where is the additional money going to come from to pay for public services? You're going to have to cut those services, plain and simple. You can't take money out the jar and say, well, voila, we can have all the things we had with money in a jar, even though there's no money in the jar. You have to make sure that you plan and spend wisely. So let's take a look at what Democratic lawmakers had to say about this. Now, Democratic lawmakers say the criticism ignores both how the legislative process works and what has actually been advanced so far. Now, this is very important because anybody can put a bill up, right? Any legislator can say, hey, I want this bill going up. But that doesn't mean it makes it out of committee or even brought up in committee in order to be argued and then voted on. And then if favorable, passed on out of subcommittee to the overall committee. And then from there, argued on the House floor, voted on the House floor, and then packaged and passed on to the other House at crossover. They do the same thing with it. And then from there, it's voted on and passed. And then the bill becomes law. The bill then passed out of General Assembly, and it goes to the governor's desk to sign it, to veto it, or to let it sit there and let it become law. So there's a long process for laws to become laws. So once again, the dormant tax proposals that the Republicans have seized on are just that. They haven't gone through that process. Senator Van Valkenburg, Democrat out of Henrico, he said there's a lot of noise out there about tax policy. And he talks about this, attributing the campaign to disingenuous actors. Delegate Helmer out of Democrat of Fairfax echoed the same point, saying Republicans are cherry-picking bills that have not passed or even been voted on. Helmer even said there's a selective narrative going on right now that's not focused on the actual bills that are passing the legislature, which are focused extremely on affordability. And I mentioned those first because I wanted us to understand that there are bills that have passed that are going to lower costs and make it more affordable for families across the Commonwealth. Helmer said the reality is, at the end of this session, what we can promise every single Virginian is that the promises we made are promises we're going to deliver on. He also said that he tied affordability pressures to broad economic forces, including federal policy, saying Virginians are struggling with housing, energy, and grocery costs. He also said here in Virginia, they're going to have people that understand that the middle class and every hardworking Virginian is struggling to make ends meet right now. Jessica Anderson, Democrat freshman out of Williamsburg, she addressed the issue on Facebook directly. She said there's been a lot of conversation happening on the mainstream media from my delegate colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And they're really hyping up the bills that have been introduced by various delegates in the Democratic Party and making this very wild assumption the governor endorses every piece of the policy that has been introduced, which is incorrect. And she also noted that Anderson noted that she did not vet her own legislation with Spanberger before filing it. Once again, any delegate, any general assemblyman can file anything. Technically, she wasn't even the governor when she introduced them. So what she said, she emphasized that the individual lawmakers file bills based on district priorities, not party mandates. So that doesn't mean every bill gets introduced. Because it's introduced by a Democrat, it's going to get across the finish line. You cannot assume that. And she says this assumption is so wild. Now, she also played a clip of Donald Trump's video, who last week accused Spanberger of raising taxes after taking office, a claim that is untrue because the legislature sets tax rates, not the governor. This is what President Trump's message said. He said, quote, Glenn was a friend of ours and worked so hard on cutting taxes, referring to Governor Youngkin. Trump then says this woman came in and in one swoop, she raised everything up higher than it ever was. So again, we know how our president talks, so that's not, surprising that he made a statement like that. It is governor, but he said this woman. So when you take a look at what's happening, the story, we have one political scientist, someone who I admire, political scientist, Farnsworth out of University of Mary Washington. And he said the story of Spanberger as a tax queen has been part of the conversation in Virginia for about a week now. So, he's looking for the governor to respond. But what he says is silence in the governor's interest. Silence is not in the governor's interest. However, when we take a look at it, he also noted the scope of many tax proposals also matters in how voters perceive them. So once again, there are a lot of proposals that have made it out that the governor has put forth to make things more affordable. Now, you do have some proposals and bills in there that would increase tax rate, but once again, they haven't made it out yet. And who says that they will make it out? But one thing we do know is that the ones to help make Virginia more affordable from the governor's agenda itself, they actually have. But some of these tax bills are proposals, not bills, but proposals, include additional local sales tax in Virginia across counties and cities, new personal property tax on electric leaf blowers and electric landscaping equipment, large employer tax, gun and ammunition tax, new income tax brackets, delivery tax on Amazon, Uber Eats, FedEx, UPS orders in Northern Virginia, event tax, storage facility tax, gym membership tax, dog walking, dog grooming tax, counseling tax, vehicle repair tax, home repair tax, dry cleaning tax, ride share, fantasy sports tax, and investment income tax. Now, again, there are several others there as well. Anybody can put up a proposal, but that doesn't mean that it will become law, and it doesn't mean that the governor supports it for her making Virginia more affordable agenda. So that's why we do the show. We make sure we pull back the covers and delve into what's really happening so you can stop listening to or drown out the stump speech and the white noise and get straight to the facts. Because one thing we do here on Stay the Water, we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. And when we discuss issues important to you, the community, we make sure that they're important, not just affecting you, your city, your Commonwealth, and yes, also your country. So we're going to continue to follow these bills as they make it through the General Assembly and the legislative process to make sure that you're well informed and you know what's happening in your community. Once again, enjoy the Super Bowl this Sunday. Enjoy friends and family. Don't eat too many chicken wings. And as again, I say, we'll see you next week. God bless.
Hi, I'm Terry Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.